Have you ever wondered what it would be like to serve someone every single day without them truly seeing who you are? Until one night, everything changes in the most unexpected way. Sarah Mitchell never imagined that showing up to a blind date with only $8 in her pocket would put her face to face with her regular customer in the most surprising situation of her entire life. A story that will make you believe in destiny. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single detail of what happens next. Sarah Mitchell stared at herself one last time in the cracked mirror of her tiny studio apartment, feeling butterflies dancing wildly in her stomach. At 26 years old, she had never experienced a real date, much less a blind encounter arranged through a dating app that her co-worker Jennifer had practically forced her to download 3 weeks ago. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the emerald green dress that Jennifer had lent her that very morning, insisting with that mischievous smile she always wore. "Girl, you absolutely have to try this at least once," Jennifer had told her while helping her pick out the outfit. Sarah sighed deeply, knowing her friend was absolutely right about taking this chance. For the past 4 years, she had been working as a waitress at the Golden Spoon, an upscale bistro in downtown Chicago, serving the city's elite while her own social life remained practically non-existent. Her days off were spent doing laundry at the laundromat or helping her aging father fix things around his small house in the suburbs. Tonight would be completely different. Tonight, she would dare to dream about being chosen by someone special. She grabbed the $8 she had managed to save, her only fortune after paying this month's rent, and carefully tucked them into her small handbag. The dress fit her a bit loosely around the waist, but the color brought out her pale complexion and made her hazel eyes sparkle in an unusual way. Jennifer had also insisted on lending her black kitten heels, even though they pinched her feet uncomfortably. "Oh God, what am I even doing?" Sarah whispered to herself as she applied the cheap drugstore lip gloss she had picked up on her way home from work yesterday. Her heart was pounding so frantically she thought it might burst right through her chest. She had been messaging with Marcus, her mysterious date, only through the app for nearly 3 weeks now. He seemed kind, hard-working, someone who might actually understand her simple world and modest dreams. He had promised to take her to a nice restaurant in the heart of the city, something that sounded absolutely impossible and dreamlike to Sarah. She took a long, steadying breath, grabbed her old car keys and walked out of her apartment with a dizzying mixture of terror and excitement coursing through her veins. For the first time in years, she actually felt beautiful. For the first time in what seemed like forever, she had genuine hope burning inside her chest. The drive in her beat-up Honda Civic to the restaurant called the Silver Lily felt like an eternity. Sarah turned on the radio to calm her frayed nerves, but even the romantic songs playing made her more anxious than relaxed. She had woken up extra early that morning to finish all her tasks at the restaurant before her shift ended, wanting everything to be perfect. She had cleaned every corner of that upscale establishment with more care than usual, as if performing some kind of ritual for good luck. For 4 long years, she had worked there without anyone really noticing her beyond a polite good morning or a casual thank you. Michael Davidson was a serious man, elegant, always focused on his business calls and important meetings. Sarah admired him from a distance, but she knew they belonged to completely different worlds. He lived surrounded by luxury and success. She could barely afford her monthly rent payment. While she drove through the illuminated streets of Chicago, she couldn't possibly imagine that tonight their destinies would cross in the most unexpected way. The restaurant appeared before her like a golden oasis, with its warm lights and elegant couples entering and exiting through the glass doors. She parked her aging car with trembling hands, checked her reflection in the rearview mirror one more time, and whispered a small prayer under her breath. Marcus had told her he would be waiting for her at 8 o'clock sharp at the table by the large window overlooking the city. It was 7:55 when Sarah pushed through the heavy glass door of the restaurant, immediately feeling the stark contrast between her modest world and this sophisticated place. The aroma of gourmet cuisine and the soft murmur of refined conversations enveloped her like a cloud she didn't quite belong in. The tables were decorated with pristine white tablecloths and flickering candles that created an intimate and romantic atmosphere throughout the space. Sarah felt small among all that elegance, but she tried to walk with her head held high, just like Jennifer had taught her during their practice sessions. "Excuse me," she said timidly to a waiter passing nearby. I'm looking for the table by the window. The man looked her up and down with a polite but clearly evaluating smile, obviously noticing she didn't fit the usual clientele profile. Of course, miss. Please allow me to show you the way, he responded with professionalism, though Sarah could detect a certain condescending tone in his voice that made her feel even smaller. She followed the waiter between the tables, feeling curious stares from other diners burning into her back. Her heart was pumping pure adrenaline as she approached the table that would change her life forever in ways she never could have anticipated. The table by the window was empty, perfectly set for 2 people, with a spectacular view of the Chicago city lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Sarah sat down carefully, smoothing out her borrowed dress and placing her small handbag discreetly on the table. She glanced at her old cell phone. It was exactly 8 o'clock. Marcus had promised to arrive punctually, and she wanted to believe in that promise more than anything else in the world right now. The waiter offered her water, and she accepted gratefully, needing something to soothe her dry throat. Her hands trembled slightly as she took the glass, and she tried to breathe deeply to control the nervous energy coursing through her body. From her seat, she could see the restaurant entrance clearly, waiting to see a 30-year-old man appear, tall with a friendly smile, exactly as Marcus had described himself in their conversations. The first 5 minutes passed quickly while she mentally rehearsed everything she wanted to tell him about herself. She wanted to share stories about her work, her simple dreams for the future, her family back in her small hometown. She wanted to hear his stories, learn about his passions, discover if they could really connect beyond the screens of their phones and the carefully crafted messages they had exchanged. Hope shone brightly in her eyes, like the candles illuminating her table. This was her chance to finally be happy, and she wasn't going to waste it by being afraid. But what would happen when the clock hands kept moving forward, and Marcus simply never showed up? 8:15 passed like an eternity for Sarah, who kept her eyes fixed on the entrance while pretending to study the menu in front of her. Her heart, which had been racing with excitement earlier, now began to beat for a completely different reason altogether. Anxiety was creeping in like an unwelcome guest. Maybe there's traffic, she murmured to herself, clinging desperately to any logical explanation that could calm her increasingly frayed nerves. The waiter approached for the 3rd time now, asking if she would like to order something. And Sarah responded with a forced smile that she was still waiting for her companion to arrive. Her $8 burned in her handbag, an amount that would barely cover a single drink in a place like this fancy restaurant. She allowed herself to daydream for just a moment, imagining that Marcus would arrive apologizing profusely, explaining that he had some emergency at work that delayed him. They would order the most romantic dinner of her entire life and talk until the restaurant closed for the night. Her fingers played nervously with the cloth napkin while she observed other couples enjoying their perfect evenings around her. One particularly elegant couple near her table was laughing and toasting, and Sarah felt a sharp pang of envy, mixed with desperate hope, flooding through her chest. Soon, very soon, she would also be living that magical moment she had dreamed about for so long. 8:30 arrived, accompanied by an uncomfortable feeling in her stomach that had absolutely nothing to do with hunger at all. Sarah pulled out her cell phone and checked her messages for the 10th time, desperately hoping to find some explanation from Marcus, waiting for her. The screen remained empty and blank, showing no new notifications, only displaying their last conversation from the previous afternoon, where he had confirmed their date with obvious enthusiasm. "See you tomorrow at 8, beautiful. I can't wait to finally meet you in person," he had written. And those words had made Sarah sleep barely 3 hours because of pure excitement and anticipation. Now those same words seemed mocking and cruel, like an echo of hopes that were beginning to crumble and fade away into nothing. The waiter passed by her table again, this time with a less friendly expression on his face, clearly annoyed by the occupied table that wasn't generating any revenue for the establishment. Sarah smiled at him weakly and asked for a few more minutes, feeling her cheeks burning hot with embarrassment and shame. Her borrowed dress, which had made her feel beautiful at home, now seemed like a ridiculous costume in the middle of all this luxury and sophistication. The voices of other diners grew louder in her ears, their laughter more boisterous, as if the entire restaurant was celebrating while she slowly sank into humiliation and crushing disappointment. At 9:15, Sarah could no longer ignore the reality that was hanging over her like a dark and oppressive cloud. Marcus wasn't coming at all. For some reason, she couldn't understand or comprehend. The man who had filled her last 3 weeks with sweet messages and promises of a better future had decided to stand her up completely. Her eyes filled with tears that she fought desperately to hold back, biting her lower lip until she tasted the metallic flavor of blood in her mouth. "I'm not going to cry here," she repeated to herself mentally, like a protective mantra. "I'm not going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down in public." But inside, every fiber of her being was screaming with disappointment and pain that cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. Her cell phone suddenly vibrated, and for one brief second her heart jumped with joy, but it was only a notification from her phone company about her data usage. The cruel irony of the moment wasn't lost on her at all. She had spent her last savings getting ready for a date that would never happen in the first place. The couples around her continued enjoying their perfect nights, completely oblivious to the silent drama unfolding at the table by the window. Sarah felt invisible, just as she had always been, just as she perhaps always would be, for the rest of her lonely life. The sound of her cell phone startled her at exactly 9 o'clock, and this time it really was what she had been waiting for, though not in the way she had dreamed about. A notification from the dating app appeared on her screen, and with trembling hands, she opened the message that would change her night forever. But definitely not how she had imagined it would. "Hi, sorry to cancel at the last minute, but I can't waste my time with a girl like you. I don't think we're compatible at all. Have a good night." The words hit her like a physical slap across her face, and Sarah had to read the message 3 times before she could fully process what it actually meant. A girl like you. What did that even mean exactly? A humble girl, a girl who worked waiting tables at restaurants, a girl who didn't have money for expensive dinners and designer clothes. Each word in the message was like a knife twisting deeper and deeper into her already wounded self-esteem and fragile confidence. Her hands shook violently as she put away her phone, feeling like the entire restaurant was watching her, like everyone somehow knew she had been rejected before even getting a single chance. The humiliation was so intense that she felt physically nauseated, and she had to grip the edge of the table tightly to keep from swaying unsteadily. Marcus hadn't even had the decency to meet her before judging her so harshly and completely. He had discarded her like she was trash, without any real explanation, without any consideration whatsoever for her feelings and emotions. The tears she had been holding back finally began to roll down her cheeks, and Sarah knew she had to get out of there before she made a complete scene in front of everyone. She stood up on shaky legs, grabbed her handbag with unsteady hands, and began walking toward the exit with her head bowed down in shame. Each step felt like torture and agony. Each glance she felt upon her made her feel smaller and more worthless than before. The waiter who had served her gave her a look of pity mixed with relief at finally being able to free up the table for paying customers. Sarah couldn't blame him at all. She would also want to escape from her own skin in this horrible moment. As she passed between the tables, she heard whispers and giggles that maybe had nothing to do with her at all, but her emotional state interpreted them as mockery, directed specifically at the poor girl who had been publicly stood up and humiliated. Her borrowed dress felt like a ridiculous disguise now, her pinching shoes like instruments of torture with each painful step. She just wanted to reach her car, drive home, take off these clothes that had made her dream of being someone else, and forget that this night had ever happened at all. But as she approached the door, something was about to happen that would change not only her night, but her entire life forever and always. At a discreet table in the back corner of the restaurant, a pair of eyes had been watching her throughout the entire evening. Eyes that knew her better than she could possibly imagine right now. What Sarah didn't know yet was that someone had been a silent witness to all of her humiliation, and was about to change her destiny forever in the most unexpected way. Sarah stopped just before reaching the restaurant door, feeling like her legs wouldn't support her for even one more step forward. The tears were falling freely down her cheeks now, staining the little makeup she had applied so carefully that afternoon with such hope and excitement. A girl like you. Marcus's words echoed in her head like a cruel song that she couldn't stop or silence no matter how hard she tried. She leaned against the wall next to the entrance, trying to regain her composure before going out into the street where she would have to walk to her car, with whatever dignity she had left. Her handbag trembled in her hands while she searched for a tissue, but she only found a crumpled napkin from the McDonald's, where she had eaten breakfast that morning before work. The irony hit her like another slap to the face. That morning, she had been so excited she could barely eat anything, dreaming about this magical night that had turned into her worst nightmare imaginable. Now she understood why she had never had real dates before. Why men like Marcus discarded her before even meeting her face to face. She was just a waitress, a girl without a college education, without money, without a bright future to offer anyone at all. Her $8 remained in her handbag, useless and mocking, a reminder of her own poverty and limitations. She closed her eyes tightly and tried to imagine she was home, safe in her small room where nobody could hurt her like this ever again. The restaurant continued its normal rhythm behind her, the happy couples continuing with their romantic dinners, completely oblivious to the drama developing near the door. Sarah could hear the laughter, the clinking of wine glasses, the soft murmur of intimate conversations. Everything she had dreamed of having that night with someone special who would see her as worthy. Her heart felt like it was made of shattered pieces. Each beat was painful, each breath a struggle against the weight crushing her chest. "I'm such a fool," she whispered through sobs that she could no longer control. A fool for believing that someone like me could have something like this in her life. She wiped her face with the napkin, knowing her cheap makeup was completely ruined by now. Jennifer had told her she looked beautiful when they said goodbye that afternoon, but now she felt ugly and invisible, like she carried a mark that screamed, "Not good enough!" for the whole world to see clearly. The borrowed dress that had made her feel special now felt like a lie, like she was playing at being someone she could never truly become. Her uncomfortable shoes hurt as much as her wounded pride, reminding her that she didn't even have appropriate clothes for a date at a decent place like this. The dream of being chosen, of being loved, was evaporating like smoke between her fingers, leaving her more alone than she had ever felt before in her entire life. While she tried to dry her tears and gather the strength to walk to her car parked outside, Sarah didn't realize that from a table in the most discreet corner of the restaurant, someone had observed the entire scene with growing concern and worry. Michael Davidson had arrived at the restaurant an hour earlier for a business dinner that had been cancelled at the last minute, and he had decided to stay to eat alone and review some important documents. He was a man of strict routines who rarely stepped outside his social circle. But that night, fate had placed him exactly where he needed to be at precisely the right moment. For the last 45 minutes, he had been concentrated on his papers, making notes and making discreet calls when something had caught his peripheral attention. A familiar figure at a table by the window, someone who seemed familiar but different at the same time. At first, he couldn't place where he had seen that woman before, but something about the way she sat, the way she nervously moved her hands, awakened a recognition that disturbed him deeply for reasons he couldn't explain. He looked up from his documents and observed her more carefully, feeling a strange curiosity about this woman who seemed so out of place in the elegant restaurant atmosphere. She wasn't the usual type of clientele, that was obvious, but there was something about her that powerfully called his attention in a way he couldn't quite understand. The revelation hit him like lightning when Sarah stood up and walked toward the exit with her head down. It was Sarah, his waitress from the Golden Spoon restaurant where he ate lunch every single day. But she was completely transformed tonight in a way that left him absolutely breathless. For 4 years, Sarah had been practically invisible to him, a silent and efficient presence who kept his usual table clean and brought his coffee exactly how he liked it without ever interfering in his busy life. He knew her as a simple woman who arrived early, worked quietly, and left without making any noise, always dressed in modest work clothes, with her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail for her job. But tonight, she was completely different from the Sarah he thought he knew. Her hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, framing a face he had never really noticed before in all these years. The emerald green dress highlighted her figure in a way that surprised him greatly, and there was a natural elegance in her movements that left him fascinated and intrigued beyond measure. How is it possible I never saw her this way before? He thought to himself, feeling a mixture of confusion and something deeper he couldn't identify or name. For years he had lived in the same space as this beautiful woman, without realizing who she really was beneath the surface. The successful businessman who could close million-dollar deals without blinking was left completely speechless upon discovering the beauty that had been hidden under the surface of his daily routine. But what truly broke Michael's heart was realizing Sarah's emotional state right now. From his table, he could clearly see that she had been crying, that something terrible had happened during this evening that was supposed to be special for her in some way. His protective instincts, dormant for years of exclusive focus on business, suddenly awakened with an intensity that surprised even himself greatly. He saw how she leaned against the wall, how her hands trembled uncontrollably, how she struggled to control the tears staining her cheeks with mascara. In that moment, Michael Davidson, the man who managed business empires without flinching, felt something he hadn't experienced in years and years of cold business dealings. The urgent need to protect someone other than himself. He couldn't bear to see Sarah in that state of distress. He couldn't just sit there while she suffered just a few meters away from where he sat. His documents were forgotten on the table as an inexplicable force pushed him to take action immediately. For the first time in a very long time, business took a back seat, replaced by something much more powerful than profit margins and contracts. Genuine compassion for a woman who had been under his roof for years without him truly knowing her at all. He stood up slowly, his heart beating in a strange way, knowing he was about to cross a line that would change their relationship forever and always. Would he have the courage to approach her? Or would he let Sarah walk out of his life without knowing that he had witnessed her pain tonight? Michael stood next to his table, paralyzed by a mixture of emotions he didn't know how to handle or process. His hands, accustomed to signing million-dollar contracts without trembling, now shook slightly as he watched Sarah struggle against her tears near the door. For 4 years, he had lived his life mechanically, moving from work to meetings to more work, returning each night to an impeccably maintained home without thinking about the woman who kept it that way for him. Sarah was simply part of the silent functioning of his household, like the heating system or the security alarm, something that worked perfectly without requiring his attention or thought. But seeing her there, vulnerable and beautiful in a way he had never imagined possible, shattered that cold perception he had built around his life completely. How could I have been so blind all this time? He asked himself, while observing her wipe away tears with a crumpled napkin. The woman who cleaned his house with such care, who prepared his coffee exactly how he liked it, who always had a shy smile when they crossed paths in the hallways, was incredibly beautiful in ways he had never noticed. Her beauty wasn't the artificial perfection of the women in his social circle, but something authentic and natural that hit him like a revelation he wasn't prepared for. He realized he had been living like a ghost in his own home, so obsessed with success that he had lost the ability to truly see the people around him every single day. The businessman, who had built an empire based on quick and decisive decisions, now found himself completely indecisive about what to do. Part of him wanted to approach immediately, comfort Sarah, and discover what had caused her such obvious pain and distress. But another part, the one that had dominated his life for years, told him to maintain his distance, to respect the social lines that separated them, to not complicate a working relationship that functioned perfectly well. She's my employee, he thought to himself. What will she think if I approach her now? Will she think I'm taking advantage of the situation? His Italian leather shoes remained planted on the floor while his mind battled between instinct and reason, pulling him in opposite directions. But each time he saw her wipe another tear, each time he noticed how she trembled, the voice of compassion became stronger than the voice of social convention and propriety. Michael had spent so much time building walls around his heart that he had forgotten how it felt to genuinely care about someone else beyond business relationships. For years, he had dated women from his same social level, comfortable but empty relationships that ended when they mutually grew bored with each other and moved on. None of those women had awakened in him the protective urgency he felt, now watching Sarah suffer in silence. It was as if a switch had been turned on inside him, illuminating emotions he believed were buried forever under the weight of his business responsibilities and obligations. What finally decided him was seeing how Sarah tried to compose herself to exit the restaurant, how she fought to maintain her dignity despite the obvious pain she was experiencing. In that gesture, he recognized a silent strength that he admired deeply. the same strength he had seen in her for years, without really appreciating what it meant. Sarah never complained about anything, never asked for anything extra beyond her modest salary. She worked with a dedication and grace that he now understood reflected who she really was as a complete person. A woman like that doesn't deserve to suffer alone, he murmured to himself quietly. And those words were like the key that finally freed his heart from the chains of indifference he had wrapped around it. He straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and made the decision that would change both their lives forever in ways neither could predict. He didn't know exactly what he would say to her. He didn't have a plan at all. He only knew that he couldn't stay sitting there while she tore her heart apart just a few meters away from him. His years of negotiation training had taught him how to read people, and he could see that Sarah had been hurt by someone else, probably by the man who was supposed to meet her here tonight. The idea that someone had hurt this extraordinary woman who had cared for his home with so much love awakened in him a protective anger he had never felt before. He stood up completely, left a generous bill on his table, and began walking toward her with determined but careful steps, not wanting to startle her further. When Michael approached Sarah, he could see up close the state of vulnerability she was in, and his heart compressed with pain for her situation. Her eyes, normally bright when she greeted him in the mornings at work, were red and swollen from crying so much. The makeup she had put on so carefully was smudged, and there was such deep sadness in her expression that Michael felt like finding whoever was responsible and making them pay dearly. "Sarah?" he said softly, his voice gentler than it had been with any person in years of cold business dealings. She looked up, surprised, her eyes opening wide in shock when she recognized her employer standing before her. For a moment it seemed like she wanted to disappear into the floor from pure embarrassment and shame. "Mr. Davidson," she murmured, quickly wiping her face and trying to compose herself desperately. "I didn't know you were here tonight." Her voice trembled with mortification at being discovered in this state by the person she worked for every day. Michael could see how she shrank into herself, how she was ashamed to be seen in such a vulnerable moment, and that only intensified his desire to protect her from more pain. "You don't have to explain anything to me," he told her, with a soft smile that surprised even himself. "But I can't just stand here watching you go through a bad time alone." His words were like a healing balm for Sarah's wounded heart, who hadn't expected compassion from anyone, especially not from him of all people. The physical closeness allowed Michael to notice details that impacted him even more deeply than before. The emerald green dress she was wearing wasn't expensive, probably borrowed from a friend, but it fit her so well that it highlighted every curve of her body in a way that left him breathless and stunned. Her pale skin glowed softly under the restaurant lights, and there was a delicacy in her features that contrasted beautifully with the strength she radiated even in her vulnerability and pain. How could I not see her for 4 years, he thought again, feeling like a complete fool for having been so blind to what was right in front of him. He could smell her perfume, something simple but feminine, that mixed with the natural scent of her skin, creating a combination that intoxicated him, in a completely unexpected way he hadn't anticipated at all. Her hands, which he had seen work tirelessly in his house, now trembled delicately as she clutched her small handbag tightly. And Michael had to control the impulse to take them in his own to give her comfort and reassurance. "Sarah," he said again, this time with more firmness in his voice, "I don't know what happened tonight, but nobody deserves to be alone in a moment like this one. Would you mind if I kept you company for a moment?" His offer hung in the air between them, like a bridge towards something completely new and unknown for both of them. Sarah looked into his eyes and saw something she had never seen before in all their years of working together. Michael Davidson was truly seeing her, perhaps for the very first time in 4 years of daily contact. Sarah remained completely motionless, not knowing how to react to the unexpected presence of her employer in the most humiliating moment of her entire life. Her cheeks burned hot with embarrassment while she desperately tried to find the right words to explain why she was there, crying in an elegant restaurant, dressed in borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit her properly. "Mr. Davidson, I can explain everything," she stammered, feeling like her world was crumbling even further than it already had. For 4 years she had maintained a respectful distance from him, always professional, always discreet, and now she found herself in the most vulnerable and inappropriate situation imaginable right in front of the man who paid her modest salary each month. Her mind raced frantically, wondering if this could cost her the job she desperately needed, if he would think it was inappropriate for her to be in such an elegant place, if he would judge her for her obvious pain and distress. But when she looked up to meet his eyes, what she saw surprised her completely and took her breath away. There was no judgment in his gaze whatsoever, none of the cold distance he always maintained at home during their brief encounters. Instead, there was something warm, something genuinely concerned that made her heart skip a beat unexpectedly. Michael was looking at her in a way he had never looked at her before, as if he was truly seeing her for the very first time in their years together. His eyes traveled over her face with a softness that made her feel exposed but not judged, as if he was discovering something beautiful that had been hidden from his view all along. The transformation in Michael was so evident that even he was surprised by his own reactions to seeing her this way. For years, he had built a cold and distant professional personality, especially with his employees, always keeping social barriers well-defined and clearly established. But seeing Sarah like this, vulnerable and beautiful under the soft lights of the restaurant, had demolished all those barriers in one single blow to his carefully constructed defenses. "You don't have to explain anything at all," he repeated, his voice softer than he had used with any person in years of business dealings. "I just want to make sure you're okay and safe." He realized that for the first time in a very long time, he genuinely cared about another person's well-being, not out of obligation or courtesy, but because of something much deeper that he didn't know how to name or understand. The emerald green dress she wore highlighted the golden tone of her skin in a way that left him breathless and stunned. The way her hair framed her face gave her an air of natural elegance that rivaled any high society woman he had ever known in his privileged circles. Her features, which he had only seen briefly during their morning encounters, he now studied with fascination. Noticing the delicacy of her cheekbones, the softness of her lips, the expressiveness of her eyes that reflected every emotion like mirrors of her soul and heart. It was as if he had been living for 4 years with a work of art in his house without realizing its existence or appreciating its beauty. If you've ever felt invisible to someone important, hit that subscribe button and join us as we discover how one night can change everything forever in ways you never expected. "Can I sit with you for a moment?" Michael asked, with a gentleness that surprised both of them equally. Sarah nodded without being able to speak, still processing the surreal nature of the situation unfolding before her eyes. When he sat down near her in the small space by the entrance, the intimate proximity made Sarah even more aware of his masculine presence and commanding aura. Michael was a handsome man. She had always known that simple fact. But seeing him so close outside the context of work allowed her to appreciate details she had never noticed before in their brief encounters. His grey eyes had golden flecks that shone under the light, and there were laugh lines around them that suggested he had once been more cheerful than he was now in his serious demeanor. His dark brown hair was perfectly combed, but she could see some rebellious strands that gave him a more human air, less intimidating than his usual businesslike appearance. He wore an impeccable navy blue suit that probably cost more than her salary for 6 months. But the way he had loosened his tie and slightly rolled up his sleeves made him look more accessible and approachable. "I was having dinner alone when I saw you," he explained gently, "and I couldn't help but notice that something had hurt you deeply tonight." His voice had a hypnotic quality that made Sarah relax for the first time all evening, as if being with him was the most natural thing in the world, despite their obvious differences. Despite the class differences that separated them like an invisible wall, Sarah felt a strange warmth spreading through her chest as she listened to the genuinely concerned tone in Michael's voice. For 4 years she had worked in silence, moving through his house like an efficient ghost, always wondering what kind of man he really was beyond his cold business facade and professional demeanor. Now, sitting near him in this intimate environment, she was beginning to see layers of his personality she had never imagined existed beneath the surface. "I had a date tonight," she finally murmured, the words coming out in an embarrassed whisper that barely reached his ears. "But he decided I wasn't worth his time or effort to meet." Her eyes filled with fresh tears as she remembered Marcus's cruel message, and she saw how Michael's expression hardened slightly with barely contained anger. "He sent you a message?" he asked, and when she nodded affirmatively, his jaw tensed in a way that suggested he was holding back considerable anger on her behalf. "Any man who would treat a woman like that doesn't deserve even 1 second of your time or thoughts," he said, with a firmness that made Sarah's heart accelerate unexpectedly. "And he clearly has no idea what he's losing by rejecting you so carelessly." His words were like a healing balm for her wounded self-esteem, but more than the words themselves, it was the sincerity in his eyes that began to heal something broken deep inside her damaged heart. For the first time in years, someone was defending her publicly. Someone thought she was worth more than rejection and humiliation from thoughtless men. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable at all, but rather charged with an electricity that neither of them had expected to feel tonight. Michael found himself studying every detail of Sarah's face, memorizing the way her eyelashes created soft shadows on her cheeks when she looked down shyly, the way she bit her lower lip slightly when she was nervous, the exact color of her eyes that changed from hazel to golden, depending on how the light fell across her delicate features. It was as if he was seeing color for the first time after years of living in black and white, and the sensation was so intense it left him dizzy and disoriented. "Sarah," he said softly, testing how her name sounded on his lips in this new context that felt both strange and natural. "I don't know if it's appropriate for me to say this, but you look incredibly beautiful tonight in that dress." The words came out before he could stop them, loaded with an honesty that surprised even himself completely. He saw how she blushed deeply, how her eyes widened with surprise at his unexpected compliment, and he realized that probably nobody had said something like that to her in a long time, maybe never in the way he was saying it now. "Not just tonight," he added, as the revelation hit him like lightning. "You've always been beautiful. I've just been too blind to see it clearly before now." In that moment, sitting in that intimate space with the woman who had shared his home for years without him truly knowing her at all, Michael knew that his life had just taken a completely different direction than he had ever planned. Would it be possible that two people from such different worlds could find something real together? Or was this just a moment of compassion that would disappear with the light of day tomorrow? Sarah felt like the air escaped from her lungs when she heard Michael's words spoken so sincerely. Nobody, absolutely nobody, had ever spoken to her with that combination of respect and genuine admiration she heard in his voice right now. Her cheeks burned not only with embarrassment, but with an emotion she didn't know how to process or understand fully. "Mr. Davidson, you don't have to say that," she murmured, lowering her gaze to her hands that trembled on her lap nervously. "I know you're only being kind because you see me in such a bad state tonight." But when she raised her eyes to meet his, the intensity of his gaze left her completely speechless and breathless. It wasn't pity she saw there, nor forced courtesy or professional politeness. There was something much deeper, something that made her feel like she was the only woman in the world in this precise moment. For 4 years she had cleaned his house, prepared his breakfast, washed his clothes, always keeping herself invisible, always reminding herself that they belonged to completely different worlds that would never intersect. Michael was educated, successful, sophisticated, everything she wasn't and could never be. But the way he was looking at her now, as if he had just discovered a hidden treasure right under his nose, made her question everything she believed she knew about her place in the world and her worth as a person. His grey eyes seemed to read every thought passing through her mind, every insecurity, every secret dream she had guarded in her heart for years without sharing. "Sarah," Michael said, leaning slightly forward to close the distance between them. "Can I ask you something personal?" When she nodded with nervous curiosity, he continued with a voice that was barely an intimate whisper between them. "Would you mind calling me Michael? At least for tonight, could we forget that I'm your employer and you're my employee? Could we be simply two people who found each other at the perfect moment?" His request surprised her so much that she was left speechless for several seconds, unable to form words. The idea of calling him by his first name, of treating him as an equal, was so alien to her experience that she didn't know how to react appropriately. But there was something in his eyes that invited her to take that leap of faith, to forget for a moment the social differences that normally separated them like an insurmountable wall. Michael, she murmured experimentally, and the name felt strange but exciting on her lips as she spoke it. She saw how his eyes lit up when he heard her say it, how a genuine smile spread across his face, a smile that completely transformed his serious features into something warm and inviting. In that moment, sitting near her in the intimate space of the restaurant entrance, he didn't seem like the powerful and distant businessman she knew from work. He seemed simply like a man, vulnerable in his own way, searching for a real connection with another human being in a world of superficial relationships. It was as if they had both removed masks they had been wearing for years without realizing it. The waiter approached discreetly, clearly relieved to see that finally someone else was there with the woman who had been occupying space without ordering. "Would you like to order something?" he asked with renewed professionalism in his voice. Sarah tensed immediately, remembering her $8 and the reality of her economic situation pressing down on her. She couldn't allow Michael to pay for her. It would be too humiliating and inappropriate. But she also didn't have money for dinner at a place like this expensive restaurant. "I should actually go," she began to say. But Michael interrupted her gently with a raised hand. "Please stay," he requested, and there was something in his voice that stopped her completely in her tracks. "It would make me very happy if you would join me for dinner. Not as employer and employee, but as friends getting to know each other." The word friends hung in the air between them, loaded with possibilities that neither dared to name yet, but both felt with every fiber of their beings. Sarah looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of condescension or pity, but only found genuine sincerity staring back at her. "Are you sure about this?" she asked softly, and when he nodded with a smile that took her breath away completely, she felt something melting inside her chest. "Then yes," she murmured quietly. "I would like to stay, Michael." His name sounded increasingly natural on her lips, increasingly less forbidden than before. The waiter took their orders, and for the first time all evening, Sarah allowed herself to truly relax and breathe normally. While they waited for the food, Michael found himself fascinated by every small detail about Sarah that he had never had the opportunity to observe before tonight. The way she gestured slightly when she spoke, how her eyes lit up when she got excited about a topic, the soft laugh that escaped her lips when he made a comment that amused her genuinely. If he couldn't help or wouldn't help the human with something, he does not say why or what it could lead to, since this comes across as preachy and annoying. "Tell me about yourself," he asked, genuinely curious to know the woman who had been under his roof for years, without him realizing who she really was as a complete person. Sarah was shy at first, not accustomed to being the center of positive attention in this way, but gradually she began to open up to him like a flower blooming. She told him about her family in a small town in Wisconsin, about how she had come to Chicago, searching for a better life and opportunities, about her simple dreams of someday having a small house of her own, with a garden where she could plant flowers and vegetables. Her stories were humble and modest, but they were full of warmth and authenticity that touched something deep in Michael's heart that had been cold for too long. He realized that for years he had been surrounded by people who told him what they thought he wanted to hear, playing games and pursuing agendas. But Sarah spoke from her heart, without filters, without hidden agendas or manipulations. It was refreshing in a way he hadn't experienced in decades of superficial relationships. Each word that came from her lips made her more interesting, more desirable, more necessary to him in a way he couldn't explain rationally to himself. When the food arrived, something magical began to happen between them that neither had anticipated. The social differences gradually faded away, replaced by a genuine human connection that surprised both of them with its unexpected intensity and depth. Michael found himself laughing more than he had laughed in months, relaxing in a way he didn't remember ever doing before with another person. Sarah, for her part, began to see the man behind the title and success, the lonely heart behind the business empire and wealth. "You know what's the strangest thing about all of this?" Michael said, setting his fork aside and looking directly into her eyes with complete focus. "For 4 years we've lived in the same house, breathed the same air, been so physically close, and yet we're meeting for the first time tonight as real people." Sarah nodded, feeling the same incredulity and wonder at the situation. It's like we've been two strangers living parallel lives that never touched, she responded softly and thoughtfully. I never imagined that you were so human and relatable. Her comment made him laugh, a genuine laugh that transformed his entire face into something warm and approachable. So human, he repeated with amusement dancing in his eyes. I suppose I've spent so much time being the boss that I forgot how to be simply Michael underneath it all. In that moment, with the city lights shining through the window and their conversation flowing as if they had known each other their whole lives, both knew that this night had changed something fundamental between them, something that could never go back to how it was before this evening. But what neither of them knew yet was that this magical connection was only beginning, and that destiny had much bigger plans for them than they could possibly imagine right now. The conversation continued flowing between them, as if they had been waiting their entire lives for this opportunity to truly know each other as complete people. Michael found himself sharing things he had never told anyone before. Secrets about his lonely childhood in a wealthy but cold family, about how he had built his business empire as a way to fill the emotional void he had carried inside since he was young. My father never had time for me, he confessed, turning his water glass between his hands nervously. He was always too busy building the family business. And my mother, well, she preferred charity events and social gatherings to spending time with her only son. Sarah listened with an attention he had never received from any woman before in his life. Her eyes were full of genuine compassion that completely disarmed him and broke through his defenses. I grew up in a mansion full of employees but empty of real love and affection, he continued, surprising himself with his own vulnerability and openness. I suppose that's why I became so cold and distant from everyone. I thought if I didn't get close to people, they couldn't hurt me the way I had been hurt before. His words resonated in Sarah's heart, who began to understand why he had always seemed so inaccessible during all those years of working for him. It wasn't arrogance that kept him distant from others, it was protection against pain and disappointment. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on either of them at all. He had grown up surrounded by luxury, but starving for genuine affection, while she had grown up with little money, but surrounded by the unconditional love of her family and community. I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin, Sarah shared, her voice soft, but full of nostalgia and warmth. We were poor, but my house was always full of laughter, music, and people who truly loved each other unconditionally. Her eyes lit up as she remembered, and Michael found himself completely captivated by the warmth she radiated when she spoke about her family and childhood. My mom always had the door open for anyone who needed a plate of food or a place to sleep for the night, she continued, with obvious affection. My dad worked on construction sites from sunrise to sunset, but he never came home without bringing us some small gift, even if it was just a wildflower he had found along the road home. The differences between their childhoods were so stark that they seemed to come from different planets entirely. But strangely, those differences brought them closer together, instead of separating them further apart. Michael realized that all the money in the world hadn't been able to buy him what Sarah had received for free. A family that loved her unconditionally and completely. I came to Chicago when I was 22, she continued, with barely $300 and a dream of sending money back to my family. I never imagined I would end up working in a house as beautiful as yours, serving someone as successful as you have become. When she mentioned his house, both of them felt the strange reality of their situation pressing down on them. They were having dinner as equals, sharing their souls, when tomorrow she would go back to cleaning his floors and he would return to his office and business meetings. Sarah, Michael said softly, extending his hand across the table until his fingers brushed against hers lightly. Can I ask you something very personal? The physical contact electrified both of them, a spark of connection that went far beyond anything friendly or professional. She nodded, her heart beating so hard she was sure he could hear it pounding. Why have you never gotten married? A woman like you, so beautiful, so caring, so real and genuine. How is it possible you're still single? The question took her by surprise, and for a moment her defenses rose automatically to protect her heart. But the sincerity in his eyes convinced her to be equally honest and vulnerable with him. The men in my social circle see me as a good option to marry quickly and have children, she explained, with a sad smile crossing her face. But they've never really seen me as a complete person with dreams and desires. And the men from other circles, well, like Marcus tonight, they think I'm not good enough for them to even give me a chance. Her fingers intertwined naturally with his as she spoke, and neither made any movement to separate or pull away from the contact. I've always dreamed of finding someone who would love me for who I really am. Not for what I can do for them or what I represent socially or economically. Her words were like arrows straight to Michael's heart, who realized he had been searching for exactly the same thing his entire adult life, only in all the wrong directions and wrong people. The moment became more intimate, when Michael gently squeezed her hand and leaned forward, reducing the physical distance between their bodies across the table. "And you?" Sarah asked, with a bravery that surprised even herself completely. "Why is a man like you having dinner alone on a Friday night instead of with someone special?" The question made him smile with irony, because all the women I've known in my social circle have been interested in my last name, in my bank account, in what I can do for their careers, or their social status, he confessed honestly. I've had relationships, but I've never had a real connection with anyone that mattered. I've always felt like an actor playing the role of the perfect boyfriend, the ideal husband, without anyone bothering to know the real man behind all of that success and wealth. His words flowed with brutal honesty that moved her deeply and touched her heart. Tonight is the first time in years that I feel like myself completely. With you I can be simply Michael, not the heir, not the CEO, not the coveted bachelor that society pages write about. Just a man who's discovering that the most incredible woman he's ever known has been living under his roof for 4 years without him realizing it until now. Their eyes met and held for long seconds, communicating in a language that went beyond words and speech. It was as if they could see directly into each other's souls, recognizing in the other something they had been searching for without knowing it existed. The tension between them was palpable and electric, charged with possibilities that neither dared to name yet. But both felt with every fiber of their beings and hearts. The restaurant began to empty gradually around them, but they were so absorbed in their conversation that they barely noticed the passage of time at all. It was as if a magical bubble existed around their table, protecting them from the outside world and all the complications their situation implied for their different lives. "I can't believe we're here together," Sarah murmured, marveled by the surreal nature of everything happening. "This morning I woke up thinking you were this unreachable man, almost like a mythical figure in my daily life. And now," she paused, searching for the right words to express what she was feeling. "And now," he encouraged gently, his eyes shining with an intensity that made her feel like she was the only woman in the world who mattered. "Now I realize you're real, that you have a heart that can be hurt and damaged just like anyone else in this world," she completed, her voice barely a whisper between them. "And you," he responded, gently caressing her knuckles with his thumb in slow circles. "You've made me remember what it feels like to be truly alive and present. For years I've existed on autopilot, fulfilling roles and expectations that others had for me. But with you, I feel like I'm waking up from a long grey dream that I didn't even know I was trapped in." The waiter approached discreetly to inform them the restaurant would be closing soon, but neither of them wanted this magical night to end at all. They had discovered something precious together, something that transcended all the social and economic barriers that separated their different worlds, and the idea of returning to reality terrified both of them equally. Would they have the courage to admit that what they had found tonight was more than friendship? Or would they let the dawn destroy the magic they had created together in this perfect bubble? The moment of truth arrived, when the waiter brought them the check, and the restaurant began closing around them completely. Michael paid without Sarah being able to even object or offer her $8. And when they walked out together into the fresh Chicago night air, both knew they had reached a point of no return in their relationship. The city lights shone like earthly stars, creating a romantic atmosphere that seemed designed specifically for this moment. They were sharing together. "I don't want this night to end," Michael confessed, stopping next to Sarah's old car and turning to face her completely under the streetlights. She looked even more beautiful now, her pale skin glowing softly, and her eyes reflecting all the emotions running between them like electric currents through the air. "Sarah, I know this is complicated and messy. I know tomorrow everything will be different in many ways, but I can't pretend that what happened here tonight hasn't changed everything for me completely." His words hung in the night air, loaded with implications that both understood but didn't yet dare to explore fully and completely. The gentle breeze moved Sarah's hair slightly, and Michael had to control the impulse to reach out and tuck a loose strand behind her ear tenderly. The intimacy between them had grown exponentially during dinner, but now, alone on the street under the moon and stars, it felt almost overwhelming in its intensity and power. "Michael," Sarah murmured, her voice trembling slightly with emotion and nervousness, "I don't want it to end either. This has been the most incredible night of my entire life, truly." She took a step closer to him, reducing the distance between their bodies until she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "But I'm afraid," she admitted, with an honesty that completely disarmed him and broke his heart. "I'm afraid that tomorrow you'll wake up and realize this was just a moment of compassion, that I'm just your employee who had a bad night, and you felt sorry for me and nothing more." Her insecurities surfaced, all the years of feeling less than others, of being invisible, of not being good enough for anyone to truly want her. Michael felt his heart break hearing her fears and doubts, realizing how much damage the world had done to this extraordinary woman standing before him. Without thinking twice, he raised his hands to gently frame her face, forcing her to look directly into his eyes with complete focus. "Sarah, look at me," he said with gentle firmness in his voice. "Does this seem like compassion to you at all?" His grey eyes shone with an intensity that both reassured and terrified her at the same time. "What I'm feeling for you right now goes far beyond compassion or pity. I don't know how to name it yet. I don't know where it will lead us both. But I know it's real, more real than anything I've felt in my entire adult life up until this moment with you." Their faces were so close now that they could feel each other's breath, and the tension between them reached a critical point that neither could ignore any longer or deny. "Can I kiss you?" Michael asked, his voice hoarse with contained emotion, his eyes seeking permission in hers desperately. Sarah felt her heart stop for a second, before beginning to beat so hard she thought it would burst out of her chest completely. For 4 years she had secretly fantasized about this moment without ever believing it could actually happen in reality. And now that it was here, it felt like a dream she was afraid to wake up from and lose forever. "Yes," she whispered, barely audible, but he heard her perfectly in the quiet night. When their lips met, it was as if the entire world stopped spinning on its axis. The kiss began soft and tentative, as if both were savoring the incredibility of the moment. But it quickly intensified when they realized the depth of the connection they had been denying all evening. Michael's lips were soft but firm, and he kissed with a contained passion that spoke of years of repressed emotions finally finding their release and freedom. Sarah melted into his arms, all her defenses falling as she surrendered completely to the most romantic moment of her entire life so far. Her hands slid up to his chest, feeling the accelerated beating of his heart that matched hers perfectly in rhythm. When they finally separated, both were breathless and completely changed by what had just happened. The line that had separated their worlds for 4 years had been crossed irreversibly, and both knew it deep in their souls. "My God," Michael murmured, resting his forehead against hers gently. "What are we going to do now about all of this?" His question contained all the complications they would face together. He was her boss and employer. They came from completely different social worlds. Society's expectations and judgments would be harsh and unforgiving. But in that moment, with the taste of her lips still on his and the warmth of her body so close to his own, none of those complications seemed important at all compared to what they had found. "I don't know," Sarah responded honestly and openly. "But I know I don't want to go back to pretending I don't feel what I feel for you anymore." Her words were like music to Michael's ears, who realized this brave woman was willing to face all the difficulties that would come with exploring what they had found together tonight. "Then let's not go back," he decided, taking her hands firmly in his own. "I don't know how we're going to make this work between us, but I want to try with everything I have. I want to see where this leads us both." The mutual commitment to fight for what they had found was sealed with another kiss. This one deeper and more promising than the first, full of hope and determination for their future. The Chicago night enveloped them like a protective blanket, while they planned how to navigate the complicated waters that awaited them ahead. They decided they would take things day by day, that they would find moments to get to know each other better without compromising Sarah's job, that they would explore this extraordinary connection without caring about others' opinions or judgments. "My heart has been asleep for years," Michael confessed, gently kissing her forehead with tenderness. "And you've awakened it in just one single night. I'm not going to let you go now that I've finally found you after all this time." Sarah felt tears of happiness running down her cheeks, a beautiful contrast to the tears of pain she had shed hours earlier in this same place tonight. "I never thought someone like you could love me," she murmured through her emotional tears. And he interrupted her gently but firmly. "Not someone like me, Sarah. Me, Michael, the man you awakened tonight, who you've made feel complete for the first time in his entire life." As they said goodbye with promises to see each other the next day, both knew they had found something extraordinary together that night. Marcus, the man who had rejected her so cruelly, had unwittingly been the architect of her happiness by not showing up that evening. Destiny had conspired to put them exactly where they needed to be, at the exact moment when both were ready to open themselves to true love, finally. But the real challenge was only beginning for both of them. How could such different worlds build a future together without society destroying them in the process of trying? The days that followed that magical night were like living in a beautiful and terrifying dream at the same time for both of them, for both. Sarah arrived each morning at Michael's house with her heart racing, not knowing exactly how to act now that everything had changed so dramatically between them. The first Monday after their encounter at the restaurant, he was waiting for her in the kitchen with a cup of coffee prepared exactly how she liked it. A detail that surprised her because she had never mentioned her preferences to him before. "Good morning, beautiful," he said with a smile that melted her completely and made her knees weak. And when he approached to give her a kiss on the lips, Sarah felt her entire world reorganize itself around that perfect moment of connection. During the following 2 weeks, they developed a secret routine that felt both thrilling and dangerous at the same time. She worked as always during the day, maintaining her professional demeanor. But in the afternoons after she officially finished her work hours, they stayed together on the terrace of the house talking for hours, getting to know each other on levels they had never imagined possible before. Michael cancelled important meetings just to spend time with her, something he had never done for any woman in his entire life before now. They shared intimate meals prepared by him personally, who discovered that cooking for Sarah gave him a simple happiness that all his business achievements had never been able to provide for him at all. Each conversation brought them closer together emotionally. Each kiss made them feel more complete as people. However, not everything was perfect in their small, secret paradise they had created. Sarah constantly struggled against the voice in her head, telling her this was too good to be true. That a man like Michael would eventually grow tired of playing with her and return to his world of sophisticated women and convenient relationships that made sense. "What are you thinking about when you go so quiet?" he asked her one afternoon while they walked through the garden together. Noticing the thoughtful expression that sometimes crossed her face when she was lost in thought. Sarah hesitated a moment before being honest with him about her fears. "I think about what will happen when you get tired of all this," she confessed, stopping next to the fountain in the center of the garden. "When you realize I'm just a simple girl who doesn't fit into your real world at all." Her words hit him like a physical slap across his face, and Michael realized how much damage had been done to her self-esteem by all those years of being treated like she wasn't good enough for anyone. "Sarah, look at me," he requested, taking her face in his hands with that gentleness that disarmed her every single time. "My real world is you right now. Everything else is just theater and obligations, a role I play because it's expected of me by society and my family. But this," he said, gesturing to the space between them, "this is the most real thing I've had in my entire life, I promise you." His grey eyes shone with a sincerity that reassured her temporarily. But the insecurities of an entire lifetime don't heal with beautiful words alone, no matter how honest they might be in the moment. Michael also faced his own internal battles and conflicts during this time. His parents had started pressuring him again about marriage and settling down, suggesting appropriate candidates from known families in Chicago's social circle, who would be perfect for expanding the family business. His mother had organized a dinner with the daughter of a business partner, a woman educated at Yale with political connections who would be perfect for his future and success. "I'm not interested, Mother," he had said firmly during a tense phone call with her. "I've already told you that when I'm ready to get married, I will choose my own wife, not you." His refusal had caused a family scandal that still reverberated with veiled threats about his future in the company and his inheritance from the family fortune. But each time he looked at Sarah, each time he saw her laugh or heard her sing softly while working in the garden, his resolve strengthened to protect what they had built together despite all obstacles. One night, while they were having dinner on the terrace under the stars, he took her hand and made her a promise that would change everything between them. "Sarah, I want you to know something important," he began seriously. "No matter how much pressure my family exerts on me, no matter what obstacles we face together, I'm not going to let you go at all. What we have is too precious to sacrifice for other people's expectations of what my life should look like." His words were like a healing balm for her insecure heart, but they were also a declaration of war against a world that wouldn't accept them easily or without a fight. The real test came 3 weeks after their first encounter at the restaurant that had changed everything. Michael had been invited to a high-profile charity gala, the kind of social occasion where his absence would be noted and criticized by everyone in their circles. For days, he had struggled with the decision of attending alone or risking taking Sarah as his official date, knowing that doing so would be equivalent to publicly announcing their relationship to everyone. "I want you to come with me," he told her finally one afternoon, while she was watering the flowers in the front garden of his house. "I want the world to know that the most incredible woman in Chicago is mine, and I'm proud of that." Sarah dropped the hose, feeling like her legs wouldn't support her weight anymore. "Michael, I can't do that," she murmured, fear evident in her trembling voice. "I don't belong in that world at all. I won't know how to behave properly, what to say to people, how to dress appropriately. They'll realize immediately that I'm not like them at all and judge us both." Her reaction didn't surprise him at all, but he had hoped that 3 weeks of constant love and support would have strengthened her confidence in herself and their relationship. "I don't want you to be like them," he responded, approaching and taking her in his arms protectively. "I want you to be exactly as you are right now. You're more real, more genuine, more beautiful than any woman who will be at that gala tonight. And if they can't see that clearly, it's their problem entirely, not ours at all." His faith in her was unshakable and complete. But Sarah knew that facing the public scrutiny of Chicago's high society would be the most difficult test of their relationship so far. After 2 days of internal debate and long nighttime conversations, Sarah made the bravest decision of her entire life up to this point. "I'll go with you," she told him, her voice trembling but determined and resolved. "If you really believe I can do this, if you really think I'm worth all the drama this is going to cause for both of us, then I'll go and face whatever comes." The smile that illuminated Michael's face was so bright it could have lit up the entire city around them. "You're worth everything, Sarah," he assured her, kissing her with a passion that spoke of future promises and shared dreams ahead. "You're not only worth the drama, you're worth me changing my entire life for you if that's what it takes." That night, they made detailed plans together for the gala. He would hire a personal stylist to help her prepare and feel confident. He would buy her a dress that would make her feel like the queen she was to him, and they would face any reaction that came together as a united team. "Tomorrow night," he murmured against her lips tenderly, "all of Chicago will know that Michael Davidson is deeply in love with the most extraordinary woman in the entire world." His words were like a magic spell that transformed Sarah's fear into determination and courage. For the first time in her life, someone was willing to risk everything for her happiness, and that gave her the courage she needed to face any storm that was coming their way. Together, they could conquer the entire world if they had to. Would they be ready for the world's reaction when they appeared together publicly as a couple? Or would this be the test that would destroy their fairy tale love before it really had a chance to grow? The night of the charity gala arrived like a hurricane of nerves and conflicting emotions for both of them. Sarah had spent the entire day at an exclusive spa where Michael's stylist had transformed her into a version of herself, she had never imagined possible before. Her hair fell in glamorous waves that perfectly framed her delicate face. Her makeup highlighted her best features without hiding her natural beauty underneath. And the dress Michael had chosen for her was a work of art in burgundy silk that made her look like an absolute goddess walking among mortals. When he saw her descend the stairs of his house, he was literally left speechless and breathless. "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my entire life," he murmured, his voice hoarse with genuine emotion. And Sarah could see in his eyes that it wasn't a romantic exaggeration at all, but the absolute truth from his perspective and heart. During the drive in his elegant car to the hotel where the event was being held, Michael didn't let go of her hand for even 1 second, as if he wanted to transmit all his strength and confidence through physical contact alone. "Whatever happens tonight," he told her as they approached the hotel entrance, "I want you to remember that you're extraordinary, that you deserve to be there as much as anyone else, and that I'll be by your side no matter what happens or what anyone says." His words were like a protective shield around Sarah's nervous heart, beating wildly. The entrance to the event was like walking directly into a lion's den for both of them. The photographers went crazy when they saw Michael Davidson, one of Chicago's most eligible bachelors, arrive with an unknown woman on his arm who clearly didn't belong to his usual social circle at all. The camera flashes momentarily blinded them both, but Michael kept his arm firmly around Sarah's waist, guiding her with confidence through the crowd of curious onlookers and gossip seekers. "Who is she? Where did she come from? Is she his new girlfriend?" The questions flew around them like angry bees, but Michael ignored them completely, focused only on making Sarah feel comfortable and protected from the chaos. Once inside the elegant ballroom, the stares were even more intense than outside. The high society women studied her from head to toe with critical eyes, clearly trying to place her in their social map and failing completely in the attempt. The men, on the other hand, couldn't stop looking at her with obvious admiration, which made Michael feel both proud and protective at the same time. "Breathe, beautiful," he murmured in her ear softly. "You're the most elegant woman in this entire place, I promise you that." His unwavering faith in her was the anchor she needed to maintain her composure and confidence. When they started walking through the ballroom, Michael introduced Sarah to acquaintances and business partners with a pride that was impossible to hide from anyone watching, and gradually she began to relax and show her natural and charming personality to others. The real surprise of the night came when Catherine Morrison, the undisputed matriarch of Chicago society and mother of one of Michael's most prominent ex-girlfriends, approached their table during dinner with obvious intent. "Michael, darling," she said with that icy smile that women of her class had perfected over generations of practice, "you haven't introduced us to your companion yet." The poison in her voice was subtle but unmistakable to anyone listening, and Sarah felt herself shrinking internally with embarrassment. But before Michael could respond to defend her, Sarah stood up with a grace that surprised even herself completely. "I'm Sarah Mitchell," she said with a genuine and warm smile on her face. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Morrison." Her simplicity and authenticity contrasted so markedly with the artificial atmosphere around them that it caused an unexpected effect on everyone watching. Catherine Morrison found herself genuinely intrigued by this woman who didn't play the usual social games at all. "What do you do for a living, dear?" she asked, clearly expecting an answer she could use to classify and possibly socially demolish Sarah in front of everyone. "I work in housekeeping services," Sarah responded, without any shame whatsoever in her voice. "And I'm very proud of the work I do every single day." Her brutal honesty left Catherine speechless for a moment, but then something extraordinary happened that nobody expected at all. The woman began to laugh genuinely, a real laugh that nobody had heard from her in years. "My God, how refreshing this is," she murmured with obvious surprise. "It's been years since I met someone so genuine and real as you are." The exchange became the talk of the entire gala for the rest of the evening. As the night progressed, Sarah felt increasingly comfortable just being exactly who she was authentically. She didn't try to imitate the sophisticated manners of the other women around her. She didn't pretend to know cultural references that were foreign to her world. She didn't apologize for her humble origins or working-class background. Instead, she let her natural personality shine brightly, her contagious laughter, her genuine interest in other people's stories, her ability to make people feel comfortable and valued in her presence. Gradually, she found herself surrounded by a group of admirers who were fascinated by her authenticity in a world full of pretense and fake personas. "This is incredible," she murmured to Michael during one of their dances together on the floor. "I thought they would hate me completely, but some of them seem almost envious that I can be myself so easily without pretending." Michael spun her on the dance floor, his heart overflowing with pride for the extraordinary woman in his arms right now. "They love you because you're real and genuine," he told her with certainty. "Because in a world full of masks and performances, you're authentic and true. That's something money can't buy at any price." The revelation hit both of them at exactly the same time with perfect clarity. It wasn't Sarah who needed to change to fit into Michael's world at all. It was the world that needed more people exactly like her to make it better. At the end of the night, when reporters asked them for an official photo as a couple, Michael didn't hesitate for even 1 second about it. "This is Sarah," he announced with a clear and proud voice for everyone to hear. "The most extraordinary woman I've ever known, and the one who has changed my life completely and forever." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of media attention and dramatic changes in both their lives that neither had fully anticipated. The photos from the gala appeared in every society magazine and newspaper, and Sarah's modern Cinderella story captured the public's imagination completely. Michael faced intense family pressure and threats, but his determination to protect and honor his love with Sarah only grew stronger with each obstacle they overcame together. 6 months after that first night at the restaurant where they had truly met, he proposed marriage to her in the same place where they had really discovered each other, with a ring that had belonged to his beloved grandmother, and a promise to love her no matter what the world said or thought about them. "Sarah Mitchell," he said, kneeling at the table by the window while tears ran down her cheeks freely. "Would you do me the honor of being my wife, my life partner, the mother of my children, and the queen of my heart, forever and always?" Her yes resonated throughout the entire restaurant, sealing a love that had begun with pain and humiliation, but had transformed into the most beautiful story of both their lives together. 2 years later, Sarah and Michael renewed their marriage vows in an intimate ceremony in the garden of their home, surrounded by both their families who had learned to love each other mutually and completely. Their small daughter, Emma, played among the flowers that Sarah had planted with her own hands, reminding them every single day that true love knows no boundaries or limits at all. Sometimes God's blessings arrive disguised as pain and suffering. That night, like every night for the past 2 years, they fell asleep in each other's arms, grateful to destiny that had united them at the perfect moment of their lives when both were finally ready. Their love had proven that when two hearts are destined to be together, no barrier in the world can separate them forever and always. If this story moved your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Share in the comments which part touched you most deeply, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss another story that celebrates the power of true love. May you find that special person who sees your inner light, no matter where you come from or where you're going in life. Join our community and share your own story of unexpected love and second chances. We're here to remind you that the most beautiful chapters of your life might be waiting just around the corner, in the most unexpected moments and places you never imagined possible.